Welcome to another episode of the Aspire to Inspire podcast. I'm Frank Wolf, and I'm happy to have a great guest here today. It's Jeremy from IBM. And Jeremy, before I ask you to introduce yourself and a bit of your background, what you're doing at IBM, I want to leave our listeners with one hook about this conversation. So we're going to talk about three topics, and I think each of those topics would alone make a great podcast. But we have three of them. So we talk about storytelling. We're going to talk about measurement and data in comms and how this connects to storytelling. And we're going to talk about artificial intelligence and how this connects to storytelling. And I think specifically also somebody who's been at a large organization, been working with IBM for quite a long time. And if you know IBM, you know they've done a lot about AI, specifically also in times when it was not en vogue, as it is now the last couple of years. So welcome, Jeremy, and it would be cool to learn a bit more about you, your role, and your role description. And and let's start with, where are you located today?
Thanks, Frank. Great to see you. I am in very sunny Bristol, which is in the southwest of England, which makes a change because it's not normally sunny. It's normally very wet. I'm from Manchester originally. Big Man United fan, so shout out to any big football folks. And we're used to the wet in the north of England. So I've moved southwest. I've been in London for about 15 years. And my job's been based in America for the last number of years. So I do a lot of remote work as well. But yeah, thanks for having me on the show. Communications designer at IBM. For my sins, I have the fortune of working with many hundreds of thousands of folks at IBM across AI and storytelling. And a little bit of my job is speech writing, some of it's storytelling, some of it looks like performance and executive coaching. But I work with a team of AI assistants as well every day, which is incredibly exciting at the moment. So I'm sure we'll get into all of that.
Definitely. Before we do this, I remember you talked about your role and where you're reporting to. And maybe we spend a bit of time there. Like, you are not in communications, right? You're not in marketing, you're not in HR.
It's a good point. And also, it's when you're looking at career trajectories, a lot of the folks listening to this pod as well, you know, maybe thinking of, where can I have the biggest impact? Where should I live? And you've got all the traditional routes that you would normally take, right? You've maybe got internal, external comms. You might have PR. Some folks might even be in HR. You might have a learning and knowledge, some sort of training function, and marketing. You know, I've been in marketing a long time. I came from Adobe Salesforce, used to help to value audiences at Facebook many years ago. So I've kind of been in that marketing realm for a while. But one of the big changes I made in my career, which I'm thinking, I need to try and remember now, I think it was end of 2018, I moved into consulting, like right into the heart of the business, where the client conversations are, where the big technology deals are, where the transformation projects are happening, working directly with clients and with client teams. And I did that for a number of reasons, because I started to see that communications didn't have the respect it deserved, just like marketing. I mean, in many ways, marketing still doesn't. You know, CMOs are not on the boards of many companies. A lot of the marketing functions, that's the first thing that gets cut. You know, it goes with training budgets and communications budgets, but that's often because it's positioned in the wrong way. So I just wanted to make sure that if I lived in the middle of consulting, if I can see a direct line of sight to the client, and if, while we're trying to have a little bit of fun and change the world, if I can put a financial or economic value on those communications, on those stories, to a way that a CFO or a CIO, chief digital officer, even going up to, say, an operations or a CEO, if they start to care about storytelling, not just when things are good, you know, we talk about art and science when things are great and healthy, but even when things are tough, like, this is why you now need good storytelling more than ever. That's why I thought it was important to go to where the money is and to speak that business language. And I think storytelling, like communications, definitely like marketing, it's got such a bad reputation over the years, and we need to kind of claim back some of that respect and credibility, I think, some of that trust.
Fantastic. That's also definitely the goal of the discussion today, to claim back the trust and hear your insights there. Just for understanding for our listeners, I understand IBM, like, as an organization, like a couple of 100,000 people. like on one hand selling like technology and real products, and on the other hand also consulting services, so large teams of people helping other enterprise, I guess probably mostly enterprise clients in complex technology
Gosh,
projects,
yeah,
right?
absolutely. I mean, just in a nutshell, we've got close to 400,000 folks, about 160,000 of them work in consulting. We have a big research division. It's got about 3,000 research scientists. We put about $6 billion a year into research, which is another side of IBM that many people don't get to see. That's where a lot of our generative AI stuff came from. It's where our quantum fleet sits. We've got the biggest fleet of quantum computers at the moment. I mean, that team, oh my goodness, has had about 6 Nobel Prize winners come out of that team. It's insane. So we kind of have a $20 billion consulting business in a $40 billion tech business that has research and various other things wrapped around it. So yeah, based in New York, founded in 1911. It's been around a little while, 113-year-old startup coming up for.
And I think IBM has a reputation, at least for me, like we talked before, like I've been at Accenture and IBM was a competitor in the market. IBM has a reputation in the market for being able to reinvent, going through ups and downs, but being always able also to reinvent itself and like really hook on the latest technologies. But if you go back to storytelling, and now we hear all these brilliant people, Nobel Prize winners, all these also tech-minded people, and now you are there, you come in the room and like saying, I'm a storyteller and I'm going to teach you how to tell a story. What's the typical thing? And you also said you are coaching executives. What is the typical situation or the typical thing people come to you, and what's the most, like the top 2-3 things you can teach them? We can start with a very easy. Probably they put in a PowerPoint deck in front of you.
Oh my God, this is going to go long, isn't it?
Let's make it very concrete. Like they put in a PowerPoint deck, and like we have this big client engagement. We want it, like it's a big deal. We want to win this deal, and here's the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Like Jeremy, what can you tell us? Like what's the?
Well, if they're talking about PowerPoint, I've got a red flag straight away, because that's definitely not there's a root of a problem right there if we're not talking about story and narrative. But I mean, look, we have a lot of amazing communicators around the business, but with just the sheer laws of probability, when you have that many people, you've got very different levels of storytelling ability. You also have, just looking at left brain and right brain, if we were to oversimplify, we might get into some neuroscience later. You start looking at, some people are much more comfortable telling stories than others. We have a very big technical community, going into architecture and software and systems architecture. And they might see themselves as not naturally creative people. So one of the things I'm usually trying to start from, before we get into any of the systems and the frameworks and the structures to try and help them win and whatever winning looks like for that particular individual, usually it's just to try and bring everything back to emotions for me. If I was to start from the simplest idea, it's just, first of all, get rid of any notion that storytelling is a soft skill. And I'll usually show them something, maybe one of the speeches that I've drawn. I sometimes post them on LinkedIn, these big one pages, and I show them how complicated really, really good presentations are. And then talk about how storytelling is a hard skill. It's not a soft skill. And straight away, they're kind of like, okay, now you're kind of slightly terrifying me a little bit. Well, we're already overwhelmed. So what can I do? I'm a technical guy, right? I'm not a creative. I'm not a storyteller. And well, first of all, we're all storytellers. The only things we've got to remember is we've got to tell stories as fast and as compellingly as possible. And in most cases, our audience is going to be the hero. So if I was to give you one piece of advice, and we could look at why this is important in a minute, you've got to tell stories that make people feel something. If you want somebody to have an action, which is generally the purpose, we're not in the entertainment world now, right? We're in business. So ultimately, we want someone to do something, whether it's work for me, buy my stuff, sign off my patent, do this deal, give me whatever budget, headcount. We need an action. Great stories make you feel something. And they make you feel something because they have a structure and a shape. But in business, great stories make you feel something so that you do something. What does the audience do? What's the action? And you need to be able to figure out that action. So generally, to start with, I'm just trying to help people to see, look, you want them to do X, Y, and Z. Great. In order for that to happen, we need to become students of emotion and understand how the most left-brained person in the world is going to have some sort of an emotional connection. Could be empathy. There's lots of ways we can do it in order to have a connection with them that triggers an action. So got to make them feel something to do something. And once you reframe emotions like that, you start getting into economics and science and structure, and business leaders love that because they can see there's a means to an end of how we're going to get to this outcome. But straight away, they're also seeing, oh, you're not the fluffy storyteller that I've heard of. The guy that comes in with his nice PowerPoints and talks about heroes' journeys and Pixar. And I'm like, no, we've got important stuff to go down. It's like, how can I help you do your job faster and more effectively? So it is just reframing the language. We got an image problem.
Yeah. I love your, like, probably it's even something you could print on a t-shirt, I guess, like storytelling is a hard skill. I guess that's such a strong reframing, and specifically for a leadership and tech audience, right? To tell them, like, that's exactly what we do here, right? But I would love to stay for one moment on the emotion side, and I have like also a very specific question on that. Specifically, if you talk about leaders or in business, there are like good emotions, like things where you say, hey, that's the upside and this is what could happen, and here's the downside. Like there's these negative and this positive emotions. Let's put it like this. Do you have a particular opinion? Like, I think in sales, a lot of people say, take the away language. It's 7 times more powerful, like the fears and the risk, what people have, and not so much how you help things to get better. Like, this versus that. Do you have an opinion on that? When to use what, or is this really something down to the...
I do. And fear's the key one. Let's take a step up. Okay, well, why is fear a challenge? We need to remove that. We've got this negative mindset. If we look at the data at the moment, a big part of what IBM does in our Institute of Business Value is we crunch a ton of data around what C-suite feel like. What's the mindset of right now? One of the stats that I come across a lot, 4 out of 5 executives feel overwhelmed and underprepared for the challenges their business is going to go through over the next 3 to 5 years. So, okay, 4 out of 5 overwhelmed, anxiety, fear, stress. As a result, they make often big decisions with their gut, sometimes going against the data. So there's almost this fear mindset. And I see it in business. I'm sure you guys do all the time. You see that these questions of what keeps you up at night, as if it's like a really good question to ask, because if you tell me what keeps you up at night, I can come in and solve your problems and I can help you. It's totally the wrong way to look at it, because it's a very left brain transactional view. What we want is what gets me out of bed in the morning, what gets me excited. So really, the question that you're asking is, okay, well, we need to try and convince people to tell better stories, which is going to be alleviating fear. What we've got to understand is, what are these 2 mindsets that we have? Up at night, out of bed. Positive, negative. MIT has been doing some studies for years, and really, really smart guys in Boston have been making these assumptions that the average Westerner has about 70,000 thoughts a day, right? 70,000. Now, they say about 90,000 of those thoughts are the same as yesterday, just autopilot, breathing and walking and doing all the stuff that you do. But when they look at the active thoughts that you have each day, at the moment, there was this case that was suggesting 80% of our thoughts are negative. Okay, so that makes kind of tied up with this 4 out of 5 business leaders are overwhelmed. We've seen loads of data around that at the moment. We could talk about Edelman's trust barometer all day long. 88% of people scared of losing their job in 2024. Negative mindset. So back to your question about story, the purpose of making someone feel something so that they do something is really a question of how do we pull them from a negative mindset to a positive one, which is why we've got to become students of emotions. So if I was going to boil down my 3-hour lecture into the next 2 minutes, it'd probably go something like this. If you Google emotions right now, do an image search, you'll see a wheel. You'll see thousands of them, periodic tables. There'll be loads of different rainbow charts. But if you believe Daniel Goleman, who wrote the book Emotional Intelligence in the late 90s, probably the #1 book on emotional intelligence, he says there's only 8 emotions. Only 8. So we want to become students of emotions as storytellers. Got to understand what they are. 5 of them are negative: fear, anger, disgust, shame, sadness. Right? So fear, one that you brought, Fear, anger, disgust, shame, sadness. Those are the negative emotions. Now, the positive emotions that we really want our audiences to feel are either love and trust or joy and excitement. And we could get into reasons why those are important later on. But generally, a story is to drive away from one of those 5 emotions towards one of the 2 positive emotions. And the only emotion that is capable of doing that is surprise. We talked about on our prep call, Frank, you remember, I think we were talking about the 9 principles, and you mentioned one of them because it was like the storytelling. Surprise being that key emotion. When you experience surprise, your emotions intensify by 400%. The number one goal of a great storyteller, surprise your audience. Because if you do, especially if they've got a negative or an anxious mindset, you want to get rid of fear, especially if you're trying to sell, surprise. Goes from what's called a survival emotion, moves to an attachment emotion. So that's the key, folks. How is your next story going to surprise your audience? Have that printed on your wall, make a bumper sticker, put a Post-it note on your computer, and you won't go far wrong.
I love that. So let me try based on this to sum this up, if I understand you correctly. So let's say I come to you with a story that I want to tell somebody else, and like say, hey, Jeremy, here's what I want to do. And you would look at this pretty much and say, okay, what's the current emotion or state of things that we think our audience is in? Like, where do we really want to make sure we catch them at the right? Because if you think they are fearful and they are not, or we think they're overwhelmed, they are not, I think the story is not going to resonate. And then you're saying, if you get that right, think about where you want to move them, and think about like ideally it's an out of bed emotion, not so much keep you awake at night, right? And think about how you can do this using surprise. It's a very powerful way to actually get them moving. Would you?
That's it. You did it much more succinctly than I did, because you're the better communicator. You did it in 7 words. How are we going to move them? That's it. That's all that matters. How are we going to move this audience? I write for some quite prominent politicians, and some of them they'll always judge a speech by oh, how good was it? How did it feel? It's like, no, they don't care about that. What did the audience do afterwards? How did it move them? Just like good writing. How did it move the reader from one place to another? A great story, how does it transform the protagonist from one place to another? It's all about movement.
Yeah. And one thing, like I've written a book about narratives in the last year, and I've read a lot about storytelling. And the most memorable thing for me that I didn't know about storytelling was somebody, Kindra Hall, actually, as an author. I've learned it from her. She said, if you think about stories that resonate well and make people care, it's stories that get the normal right. So in your perspective is, if you can actually get the emotion, and describe what people feel right now, and if you get them there, they will start to care. Like, surprise is then a great way to really get them moving. But I think the beginning of a story is highly important. And I've seen another quote that I really love about this. It's like, if you come to a doctor who gives you, and you have a pain, and the doctor describes the pain pretty well, you have a great deal of trust in that he also will be able to cure it, he or she, right? So it's this really feel seen, really feel somebody, oh, they understand me. I think that's a very powerful start of a story, or of the arc to the end, right?
It's just linked back to emotion, doesn't it? Because if you think about, even if we went all the way back to the ancient Greeks and we spoke to Aristotle, they'd start talking to us about pathos, ethos, and logos, rhetorical appeals. And for anyone that doesn't know, just go and Google pathos, P-A-T-H-O-S. It's where the word empathy and sympathy and pathetic comes from. But it's the root of emotion, really, because empathy triggers oxytocin, which delivers heightened levels of trust, generosity, and bonding. That triggers all the hormones in the right-hand side of our brain to make us feel good things, to connect with the audience with empathy, so that hopefully they go and do something. And it's the absolute trigger. And I think this is where a lot of businesses go wrong. I'd love to know what you guys do at Staff Base to try and alleviate this. because we've never got any time to focus on the audience. I see at IBM, it's one of our biggest challenges. Everyone's so busy, but yet the job of a great storyteller isn't just to tell their story, it's to have so much empathy with the audience that you tell the story in a way that resonates with them. But in order to do that, they've got to have the time to research the audience. Do you know what I mean? So
Absolutely.
I'm not just trying to teach people to tell a better story. I'm also trying to sometimes help them with time management so that they can find more time to research their audience to see what matters to them, not just what you want to say. It's like, what do they need to hear?
Yeah, that's for me also the whole narrative topic and the whole insight, like what you say is not what people hear. And what they hear really also connects to what they already have in their mind and what they're thinking about. And maybe one small tip that I learned through my research on the audience research side, we do a lot of quantitative research, like big amounts of data, and we're trying to find the averages and so on. Like, what's way more important for this is to get into qualitative research and have focus groups and actually listen. What are the words people say? Like, how do they talk about the problem? Like because that is the basis for building really resonating communications and talking in their language and really touching their mind. So that's quantitative data is always good. We agree on that.
100% with you. That's where, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but that's where our AI friends come in. Because when you don't have time, just give me those 20,000 documents, give me the demographics of every person in the audience. And now we can have the AI work out for us how to repurpose and recraft.
This is true. Jeremy, this is true. But the one thing, like here's one challenge that I see. If I have 20 interviews recorded, maybe speech to text, whatever, you have it there. And now with AI, you could say, oh, give me a summary of these interviews, right? From AI, what you might be missing is exactly that, the language. You get the large language model summary of, and I want to hear the words, like, how do they talk about the problem? I do a lot of coaching for also other startups around like positioning and go-to-market strategies, and my first thing is always like, do you understand how your audience, what's the problem, but even more important, how they talk about this? What are the words they use to describe their problem? Because if that's pretty much it tells you already a lot of things that you should write on your website. And it's not your language, it's how they talk about it.
And that's that intersection, isn't it, of humanity and technology, or technology and liberal arts, as Steve Jobs used to talk about. That side of stuff, as much as I'd love to think AI, but it's miles away from being able to do that properly, because it often can't see enough of the context in the language. Where it gets really interesting, though, is if you can start using large language models to try and understand the personality of the audience. So you know what type of emotions are going to trigger. And then as humans, we can think about, okay, well, what story do I need to tell to trigger that emotion at that time to that personality type? So it can help give us a little bit of the framework within which to try and, craft that compelling story.
Absolutely. I would love to move on to more the measurement side. Before we do this, I have a very specific question I wanted to ask you about PowerPoint, because a lot of storytelling in business happens in PowerPoint. I'm very sure IBM's using also tons of PowerPoint for the presentations, and we all know that. Do you think PowerPoint is a good tool for storytelling? If yes, how should one do it? Probably you say not too many, or what do you think is the most powerful way to kind of visualize or tell a story in a business context?
Gosh, what a loaded question. That's right there to trip me up. And you know what? The answer to that is probably the answer to the vast majority of storytelling questions. Depends what your audience wants. The audience is the hero. It's not up to me to decide. I'm not a massive fan of PowerPoint. It's an amazing tool when it's used in the right way, just like any tool. But the conversation, first of all, should never start with, what's on the slides. That's when we know that we've gone wrong. I spend a lot of time in the C-suite, and when I'm spending time with senior leaders, I often find that it's really not about the slides anyway. They don't want to see that. Steve Jobs always used to joke, if you know what you're talking about, you don't need slides. You get out a napkin, flip chart, a whiteboard. I'd rather have that. Let's draw the solution out together and have some sort of shared experience where we kind of build in the story along with the emotion and this experience of whatever goes on within that room. You know, but we're building it step by step organically. The second the PowerPoint comes out, we know where that's going to go, but also we know that there's a forced, very linear progression of how that's going to end up. If you can use PowerPoint really well, and I sometimes have presenter view on a separate iPad with all the numbers of the slides. So actually, when I'm giving a presentation, it doesn't go in order because I might be typing in 12, enter, 24, enter, 36, enter. But what I'm doing is I'm jumping from slide to slide based upon what the audience is asking. So it feels like it's highly personalized. But I think at the end of the day, if we understand the audience well enough, we know what it is that they need to see. If it's delivery, and if it's to a mid-level team, if it's to manager, if it's to procurement, if it's going to be they need to see architecture. They need to see a bunch of slides. They want a leave behind deck, but a great quote, maybe one to write down in your notebooks, folks, from a leadership guy called John Maxwell, just a beautiful guy, Dr. John Maxwell. And he said, at the end of the day, people are not persuaded by what you say, but by what they understand. I love that. Some people, that's back of a napkin. Somebody else needs a 50-slide deck. You know, somebody needs a 5-minute off-the-cuff conversation. Somebody else needs a 6-hour deep dive workshop with design thinking. It's like, as the storyteller, we can't go out with this kind of binary approach of this is the right way that we must do it. It's why most storytelling coaches fail, because they're not thinking, depends. What does the audience want? That's not, you know, empathy, isn't it? My job is to put myself in their shoes. And if they like me, we'll figure out how to do that with empathy. If they don't like me, that brings out a whole other discussion where we could talk about tactical empathy of how do you win over the hearts and minds of an audience that doesn't like you, that has no shared values. That's interesting. But depends. I dodged the question well, didn't I?
It's to be honest, I really liked Denua's answer, because as you say, there are situations where a team, maybe a technical team or whatever, wants to see the details and want to see you can deliver, right? And that's the moment when also storytelling becomes a hard skill, when you also realize I cannot always just have the story and nothing else.
It's why I do some of these, Frank. I mean, I draw these not just for fun to try and make them pretty, but I draw decks and slides and ideas purely so that I can understand, so that when I'm in front of an audience, when I'm in front of a C-suite and I've got, you know, I can draw it. I know what I'm talking about. I understand the structure. And then based upon what they say, we can repurpose it on the fly. Can't do that in PowerPoint. You know, so it's like, that's why I'm called a communications designer, because I kind of joke that I draw speeches, I don't write them, but I want to communicate in a different way.
Drawing speeches, probably that's a topic. Let's leave this for another podcast. But that's really interesting, because I would agree with one thing that you said is being able in a probably also meeting setup to stand up, go to a whiteboard, and kind of summarize things, or draw, you have the attention of the room. It's a moment also of, as you say, surprise, where you can take a whole discussion in a new direction, or where you can say, okay, here we are. And the very powerful thing, as you also said, is this sort of, people can say things and say, yeah, that's cool, but this is missing or whatever, and you draw it in. It's a magical tool to kind of build a story together with the room.
The problem is we need to really know your shit to be able to do that.
That's why I say it's not an entry level.
Exactly.
It's not an entry level thing. But if you can do this, that's a point where you can turn around. People at the end will take pictures and pretty much say that's it, and they feel like we've all done this together. That's an amazing skill to have. So that's something.
It's easy to hide behind PowerPoint. I think that's the thing for some storytellers. They treat it is a weakness, and it's too easy just to rely on presenter view. And it's like, come on, you've got to know your stuff so well. Don't practice it till you get it right. Practice till you can never get it wrong. Your focus shouldn't be worrying about what words you need to say next. You should know it well enough. Your focus should be obsessing over every person in the audience. What are they doing? Are they on their phones? Are they making notes? Are they bored? Are they multitasking? Are they on Slack? It's like, trying to understand where the audience is at. It's much more important.
Fantastic. let's try to kind of go to the next level in terms of the numbers here. And I understand you've done some research on IBM, and like you have, I guess, a very good insight into the organization. You've done some research on storytelling at scale, and like things that work, that don't work. Are there any patterns that you can share with us from this research, or any like maybe even open questions that you have around storytelling in an organization like IBM?
So it's a great question. And there's a really simple little device you can use. I used to use it at Facebook years ago to try and value audiences. I wrote a white paper about it when I was at Adobe, helping to build their marketing cloud. And then we built upon that a bit at Salesforce. And that was 12, 14 years ago or something, but still use it today. And it's the idea, it's imagine a Trivial Pursuit cheese, the little cheeses with the little piece of cheese in the middle, 3 on the left, 3 on the right. And it's almost like left brain and right brain. One of the things I was doing is I was analyzing, I think we've analyzed with AI and some of it manually, but a lot of it using automation, about 57,000 stories, decks, pitch documents, keynote speeches. Why do some work and some not? And also I'm trying to understand why on the page, sometimes a deck or a story looks great, and you can walk away and it was like, well, that just did not work for that audience. Like, what went wrong? And other ones, which were just completely spontaneous, just smashed it and just ended up doing wonderful things. How does that happen? And that's what gets me out of bed. I like taking stories to pieces to see why do they work. It's why I spend a lot of time deconstructing. And a lot of it, there's a lot of outputs from this, but the simplest one is left brain, right brain. So write this down. The best stories do 6 things, not in equal measure, and they're going to move throughout, over indexing one or another. Imagine these 6 little KPIs, and on a scale of 1 to 10, you've got a dashboard that's going to be moving towards. Left brain, it's going to inform, it's going to educate, it's going to solve a problem. A lot of business stories, that's generally what a lot of business storytellers do. Stretch, go to market, especially software stories. We inform about what's going on, we educate about a tool, and we show how we solve your problem based on what keeps you up at night. Okay, good for you. But there's very left brain. There's no emotion. I don't really care about what you do, what you stand for, why I should work with you, trust you. I've done nothing to trigger the emotions in the limbic system that triggers the hormones that helps drive that decision. So instead of inform, you've also got to inspire. Instead of educate, you have to entertain or excite in some way. You've got to engage the audience. And instead of just solving their problems, you've got to challenge them with a unique point of view. So I would say that you've got to have both, and it's going to be up to you as to which one at which part of the story you over-index with. And it might even be 6 different executives that represent each one of those, but it's got to inform and inspire, educate, entertain, challenge, solve a problem. So on all of my storytelling documents, and even the AIs that I've trained, they're all trained upon that, as to at certain points in the story that are relevant to that audience to get the outcome that we need. This bit needs to inspire, that bit needs to inform. Here's where the education piece comes in. Here's where our opinion comes in to challenge the audience. And then we end with our offerings and solution. Here's how we solve your problems, everybody. And then we have a nice urgent call to action that hopefully, has won their hearts and minds. But that's it. It's like you want to make someone feel something so that they do something. Those little 6 things, it's a great start.
Fantastic. And I guess the idea is, or your goal, or the goal should be long-term, to say we have a certain set of, like, we have an audience, we have a situation, something we want to do, and some logic that tells us, hey, based on this is how you should mix these 6 ingredients to actually make the story work really well. And I guess that's sort of the goal here, right? To have a cookbook. Let's put it like
and that's where the job is, to get away from generic storytelling. We're all going to have one-size-fits-all scripts, especially in business. We're going to have some sort of a, first call deck or a message or whatever it is. You might have a stump speech as a politician. The job of the storyteller, of how you turn that presentation into a performance, is applying everything that makes you special and then telling that story from your point of view through a lens that matches everything that makes that audience special. It's why I obsess over personality traits quite a lot, because it's like you've got to understand the mindset of the audience, because you'll see it yourself. I'll see a TED talk and go, "Oh my God, Frank, this is the best thing I've ever seen. You've got to check out Michael when he did this thing." And you'd like DM me and you'd be like, "Yeah, it was all right." But have you seen Jackie when she did this one? And I'd be like, "Yeah, it just didn't do it for me." And it's that subjective nature of storytelling, which is what makes our job so exciting but so complicated. It's why podcasts like this are so important, right? Because there isn't a one-size-fits-all answer. Humans are really flipping complicated. But as long as we've got systems and frameworks, and we know that we can look for the triggers of the audience, and I can think about what's my view of this topic, so I can bring this story to life in a way that I'm the only person that can tell the story. Once we start thinking like that, we'll be fine. And I think that's where we go wrong at business conferences. You can always tell who's written their own speech, or you can tell who's reading somebody else's deck. It stands out like a sore thumb. The audience knows. They know with the tone, the body language, all the stuff that's got nothing to do with words. You can tell.
Yeah, absolutely. From out of the 6 points you like, and I guess you said like the left side alone doesn't work, and I guess also the right side alone doesn't work, right? So you would have to have all 6 together. And the one that resonates really well with me is the challenge. There's also a book, The Challenger Sale. I'm not sure if you like. It's also like a lot of data, actually data driven. Like a team has looked at a lot of deals in business, like I think it's B2B deals, and has seen like which seller is most successful. And they found they had different types of sellers, like the relationship sales, and the lone wolf actually is part of this. But they found the most successful seller is the challenger sale, right? The person that really is challenging the prospect, or like you could say the audience, with their thinking, teaches them something new, and really comes across as an educator. More than somebody who wants to sell something. I think that resonates very well with me. And I guess that's also probably something you are talking a lot at IBM.
Yeah, and I think the way that I look at kind of the role that I'm trying to deploy around storytelling, I'm taking business, economics, I'm taking the entertainment industry and the world of politics. And I'm trying to mash those things together. It's like politics, business, entertainment. And in the middle of that kind of sits the way that we'd start to tell those stories in a different way. And that's where a lot of our folks just go wrong. They're just either they're all left brain, which is great, very transactional, very tactical. You're going to land some deals and it's going to be fine, but there'll be no loyalty. Or you might go out with all emotion, but then you understand why this most amazing marketing campaign you didn't translate to any sales. It made them feel something. It didn't give them the left brain to make them do something. And that's the bit, isn't it? Trying to understand which side is most relevant for which audience. Yeah. And it's tough.
Fantastic.
It is. It's really hard. And we need to use as many tools as we've got at our disposal, AI, whatever, to try and understand how we can do the best we can with what we've got.
Yeah, talking about measurement and your role, is there something you can share? And I guess like from a communications perspective, the big question about measurement is typically 2. Like one is, how can I improve my work? How can I learn what works and what doesn't? And I think we talked a bit about this, like about these 6 dimensions you have. But the other one is always also, how do I justify my work and justify my team and what we're doing here, right? And the resources that we are getting. Do you have this challenge, and how do you deal with that?
Oh gosh, yeah, we definitely do.
It's probably a hard one. Yeah.
How can I answer that question without getting sacked? I sometimes half joke that we need to often do get people to do the right thing for the wrong reasons. You're kind of looking at, it's a little bit like what's the best format? I don't know, depends on the audience. It's like, well, what's the best metric to measure your story? I don't know. It depends on who I'm trying to influence. But the fact we're asking that question is unusual in itself. A lot of marketing will look at engagement metrics. It's going to go through preference, consideration, awareness, all the usual stuff. Might look at NPS. It might look at some of the softer metrics. But again, a lot of those metrics just don't have the credibility and trust that they deserve in other areas of the business, which is why budgets and headcounts and other things. So I'm constantly looking for what is the one metric that the person cares about that I'm most trying to influence. So even though let's say I'm running a program inside IBM to help a couple of thousand storytellers tell better stories, a certain type of consultant in a certain market. Well, I'm going to be helping them to tell stories using all of these frameworks. And I'm helping, the outcome of that is going to be how I might have moved the needle on their level of confidence. They might have beginning, 2 out of 10 telling an IBM story, end of it 8 out of 10. We've got all sorts of metrics. It might be linked to, an increased win rate. But there's always going to be someone that's ultimately sponsoring your program, or someone that's paying for the budget or the headcount or my promotion. I want to enhance my team. I want to get more people. I want to get promoted, all that good stuff. And those other agendas, like, okay, well, what's that metric look like? Is it increased sales? Is it that if you go through my program versus somebody else's program, you close 5% more deals? You save 5 hours a week constructing deals. The pipeline of this class versus that class is an additional $300 million or whatever. You save 5 hours a week of your time if you use my AI tools instead of someone else's. But depending upon which metric, and I usually only choose one, there might be several kind of secondary metrics, but depending upon who I'm trying to influence, that will be the one metric that I start championing. And it happened on a call this morning. I can't tell you exactly what it was, but I just kept banging that drum of this one number. And I think the reason that this program was successful is because a lot of other programs might have had multiple metrics. They do a dashboard and it's got 5, 7, 9 things on it. Great. I'm going to move the needle on one. But I guarantee you, whatever that is, I will have done my homework to see that is the one metric that this leader is being judged on themselves. So I'm helping them to do their job better. So a means to an end. You help me run my storytelling program here by me helping you achieve your metrics over there.
Great. I guess it's helping that a lot of the deals that you're working on, like multi-million-dollar deals.
But I'm trying to tie it to dollars or euros, right? That's the thing. I'm not tying it to OKRs. I'm not tying it to NPS scores. I'm not looking at an engagement, which could be heavily manipulated anyway. Your video got 20 million views. Good for you. Where did they go? What did they do next? Tell me that. Did it move? Did it sell more products? Did it change consideration amongst the CIO in that particular office? That's what we want to know. Give me a hardcore economic value with a methodology that can be trusted. No assumptions. And I think that's why comms and marketing struggles the most, because the attribution model's all over the place. It's been flawed for decades. And that's why most marketers and communications folks struggle so much, because they're still using the old style of measurement.
I couldn't agree more. I would I've a career sort of in both. Like I've been the chief marketing officer of Staffbase for quite a couple. I studied marketing, so I'm coming from the marketing side. I've also worked in the comms industry for 20 years. I would say marketing figured out earlier than comms certain real outcome metrics.
Did you use lead gen? You was looking at value, cost per lead, conversion. You was looking at dollar values.
That's exactly in marketing. You can you found a language to talk about value. You build a pipeline, right? That's something that's there. You can measure this, and you can say, okay, I might have conversion rates or other things, but marketing found this way to move from an engagement metric to an outcome metric, not saying how many people went to the webinar. So that's an early indicator, but an outcome metric is actually pipeline build or something. Marketing generated something. And I think marketing is, as in all, we all want to have better measurement, is one step ahead of where communication is, because communication, most teams are on an engagement, as you say, side of things, how many people click the article, or do we have an interaction, and we are really lacking sort of the outcome metrics. And that's why that's one of the things and outcomes of this whole narrative book topic that I've been writing, because a narrative is something that you can build. The goal of communication is to say, I want to change hearts and minds. And how can I measure this? How can I measure that my audience thinks different about a topic? And how can I really validate this over time that I made this shift? Instead, a lot of also our customers, they are measured against things like employee engagement, which is a huge global measurement. If I have a bad boss or a bad market environment or whatever, there's so many influencing factors for employee engagement. So a lot of comms teams say, yeah, sort of we are connected, but by no way, and they are right, we are really responsible for that. That's why what I really love about what you just said is pick one metric, right, which matters and which people understand, and double down on this and really deliver on this, and not try to have like vanity metrics or like metrics that are too big for you. And I think comms is sort of trying different strategies here. And the learning is pick a metric that's really important, and that's sort of an outcome based metric.
I'm trying to find the name of a guy. He's called Andrew Canton. This is going to sound a little bit out there, but this is my favorite comms story of putting measurement on it, and it's 60 years old. There's a paper from Wharton, and it's called "I'm Not Mopping the Floors, I'm Putting Man on the Moon." Title of the research paper is "How NASA's Leaders Enhance the Meaningfulness of Work by Changing the Meaning of Work." And basically, this paper that was written in 2018 went to try and understand how could one piece of communications genuinely change the world. And it was a piece of communications that was only 17 minutes long. It was the moon speech. Right? President Kennedy, the 12th of September, 1962, gave the moon speech. You know, we're going to put man on the moon within a decade. We choose to go to the moon. And what this paper did is it was trying to look at the value of that speech. This is why I love this paper so much. And what they did is they used AI to measure the performance reviews of all 400,000 NASA contractors from 1962 to 1969. And the one common thread that they found in everybody's performance review was they cited the speech as being the one thing that, against all the odds, technology hadn't been invented yet, multiple assassinations, civil rights, Vietnam, Cold War, everything else. In the middle of all of that, they still, with budgets, with different changes in administration, still managed to achieve the goal, putting man on the moon, 1969. And the fact that they cited a 1,000-second speech, for me, just shows how you can quantify the value of a story, even if it's a TED Talk. Now, it might be that there's a long tail and you've got to do some clever, analytics to figure it out, but you can do it. You've just got to start thinking more creatively about how you measure the impact. So whether it's a speech or a story, whether you're looking as part of a big narrative arc, I Have a Dream as part of the civil rights narrative, you can measure it all.
Yeah. That's a perfect, I would say it's a perfect example for what I just said, based on the narrative. Like, this speech, probably was responsible for a big part, but a lot of other things also for building a narrative in the mind of everyone involved in the program. Like, say, we can do it. Like, by the end of the century, we can actually do it if we all work together, and we are not mopping the floor, we are putting a man on the moon, right? So that's it. If you can measure this narrative, that people have it, and that you can, the speech, I guess, created large parts of it. That's a powerful thing.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Looking at the time, I'd love to, and we already started to talk about AI a bit. I'd love to talk about AI, and let's try AI. I know it's a big topic. Let's start with the more specific things that you're doing right now, and then I would come to a more general, will AI replace all of us sort of discussion. But with the specific firms, you started to talk about AI assistants that you're using. Could you tell us a bit more? How does AI help you in your storytelling work today?
I've always liked the idea. I used a phrase back in 2016, I think it might have been 2017. And I was Chief Strategy Officer at Watson, customer engagement. Watson's a big part of the AI engine that IBM has.
Yeah.
And I liked the idea that it's not about AI, it's about IA. I started talking about intelligent assistants. It's just like having a really, really smart best friend that's with you all the time, that can do 10 million records a second, that doesn't get tired and emotional, and can work anytime, and it's just always on, and it's always accurate to within a degree. Needs training, could talk about that, and it hallucinates a lot. But that idea of an AI being able to augment your behavior as an intelligent assistant is something that I've kind of over-obsessed with in a good way over the last 8 years. So what I'm doing today is I have many assistants, but there's 16 main ones that I use. And each one of those 16 assistants corresponds to a different personality type. Now, it started off as just a fun experiment, because back to our conversation before, we want to put ourselves in the audience's shoes, right? We need to understand the audience's mindset. I might need to figure out a KPI of a leader. Okay, well, I need to understand how they think, which is down to personality traits. I might need to make a presentation my own, especially if someone else has given me their words. Okay, that's down to me to being able to interpret that story through the lens of my personality. And there's a load of reasons that we probably won't have time to go into about why Myers-Briggs, people can debate the pros and cons, but there's tons of publicly available data. If you was to assume that you could be different personality types at different moments in your business day, so you don't have one fixed personality, which is what Myers-Briggs is built on. When I'm speaking to you right now, I've got a different personality type. I might be an INFJ. It could be somewhere else. I'm an ENFJ. It's if you can understand what that is, you could use one of my assistants that's been trained on Myers-Briggs data, all of the things that makes me special, all the things I'm passionate about, because it's my own personal assistant, including my CV, my LinkedIn, everything, right? And then I might even take all of the stuff that I've taught around the art and science of storytelling. If I was you, I might be feeding in, the narrative age and all of the stuff that I've published would go into my AI model. And then that would be Frank. And every morning I'm going to be working with Frank to do my job for every email, every pitch, every story, every keynote. And it's going to answer it all and give me that data in a language that suits my personality type. And then I could even use another assistant. So you might have the Frank assistant, and then you've got to map to the Jeremy assistant of how are we going to have the best connection on this podcast based upon the nuances in our personality types. And we use assistants to suggest, use these questions, don't use that one. Don't let him talk too much because he won't shut up. Jeremy will just keep going. Or whatever, how do we keep the attention and the dynamics between those? AI can help you with that so much, with the structure, language, sentence structure, map into emotions, the density of language, the readability of texts. What emotion is it likely to trigger when? You need a story there, you need a stat there. Don't use that customer success story as an example for that executive. Use this one instead. Don't use that word in Germany. Use this word when you go over to Stockholm. AI gives me all of that. And that's amazing because it just helps me do my job better. I've still got to write it. I've still got to do the thing. But now it might be saving me hours and hours of my time by being that really smart, intelligent assistant. And I think for a lot of people listening to that now, that might sound like the moon for them because they might be playing with ChatGPT or something with very mixed results. But don't be disillusioned by it. There's it's the Wild West out there right now. And a lot of these models are breaking every 2 minutes. The stuff that I'm seeing inside as a global communications designer for a big company, I am using it every hour. Every hour of every day is that good. I'm using this assistant. And that's not because I'm being lazy. It's because it can do it to a better degree than I could do it on my own, which frees up more of my time to focus a bit more of what matters, which might be coaching some folks, researching an audience, whatever. So it's IA, not AI.
Jeremy, is this something that you are using yourself, or you providing these assistants also for others in the organization? As here's the storytelling coach.
Absolutely. Everybody at IBM has access to them, and we're using them as assistants. They can have a login. They'll just search for my impact storytelling program. They'll see the 16 assistants there. They just choose the one that maps to their personality type. INFJ, bang.
As one example, INFJ, what's this as for our listeners, or
so
what would be a typical personality type
I think in tech? So within our businesses, IBM and staff base, we're probably going to have most of our folks would be INTJ or ENTJ, which is generally an introvert, somebody that's intuitive, someone that's thinking, so they're a little bit more left brain than right brain. They're more thinking than feeling, and they like things to be structured, and we like things to be kind of process driven. I'm an F, I'm not a T, which is somebody who generally makes more decisions with their gut. But it's a really good process to go through, and you can actually read. I mean, I also use AI to predict the personality types of some of the people I'm spending time with, especially if we're going to try and influence them. because it really helps with language and story. Because as an INFJ, I might tell something that's a little bit more visionary, and as an introvert, I might not want to talk about myself. But actually, I've got to influence someone who's a hardcore thinker and very extroverted, and they need to see that level of leadership and credibility from me. So an example is the AI assistant might encourage me to talk about myself in a way, in a leadership environment, in a way that's going to resonate with this person.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I need you to follow me. I need you to trust what I say.
Yeah. Just that I get this right, because like that's really interesting. What you just said, like, is I have your assistants, and let's say I have to give a presentation, and two things are important. One is my audience. What are these? Is this senior leaders? Is this tech people? Is this maybe HR or marketing people? Like, who are they? And I can, and your advice is, and we come back to know your audience, right? But what we've just learned, like, this is another dimension. You can look at your audience, right? And this gives you another point of view on your audience. And you can look at yourself and like say, maybe also what are my biases? Like, how is my presentation style and so on, like, and match this together and say, should I adjust for specifically this audience, correct?
That's a great point. Yeah, because that unconscious bias, often we don't know what we don't know, and you can't see it. You can't see when it's yourself. It's like, that's why you go to a coach, because a coach is going to help to remove the obstacles that are in your way from being successful. I just train my AI models to act like coaches. So it's trying to help you kind of mitigate against any unconscious bias. So look, I know you don't want to say that, or I know you've not thought about this, but try putting this there, and maybe just have a 30-second story about, such and such a time, just to establish a bit of credibility at the beginning to engage the audience. Exactly right. Love it.
Okay. Technically, just to, I suspect it, but it's technically the AI, like the I guess large language model that you're using is IBM, like it's Watson based. Not sure if you are allowed to talk about that.
Yeah, well,
so if
all open. Yeah, absolutely. You can go on IBM, just search for Watson X. If you just if you search watsonx.ai, you'll find your way there. Just search anything to do with IBM Academy. You can find what it is. The one that I use a lot is for Meta, so the parent company of Facebook. Meta has a model called Llama 3, which came out maybe 5 or 6 weeks ago.
And it's open source, by the way.
Competitor to GPT-4, right? But one of the things that we do that is very different, which is what you need in an enterprise level AI, which is why it's the Wild West out there for people using kind of free platforms. You've got to have an AI that shows you, where did I get the data from? You've got to have the compliance and the governance. You've got to show me, what's the decision tree? How did you come up with that suggestion? Where did the data come from? What confidence level do you have that you've given me the right answer? And where are the links that I can go and double check myself so that there's no hallucinations? Once you start looking at that, you'll be fine, and AI will be phenomenal. The problem with a lot of the models out there at the moment, I mean, I use Llama 3 as part of our Watson X platform because we have that level of governance. So we're showing transparency. So I have to see that if I'm going to trust an AI with my work. That's why I use it every day. If I was just on a random bot that was just churning out answers and I didn't know where it came from, there's no way I'm going to trust that. I'll use it for fun, but I'm not going to use it every day as part of my job. Not yet. And that's where a lot of these other models are not quite there yet.
Yeah, I would agree with you totally on this in terms of like, you can go to ChatGPT or other models like for inspiration and like say, hey, that's just another opinion, or I get an idea on how to do things. The closer we get to business processes, the closer we get to things where we say we need to go from 98% to 99.9%. Like things in that, like that's, and as this is happening, and what I love about your example about the AI assistants is, I think it's a very concrete use case, how to use AI in the communications and storytelling context. And probably like one of the most advanced examples that's out there right now, which is, congratulations on that. And I think it's part of your job description to do that. But it helps our listeners also to sort of see, oh, this is where this could go, right? It's not just a, hey, this is a writing assistant, or like it can do a lot of different things very well, but it also can be a storytelling coach and like really help you to think in a kind of sort of very strategic way about that.
You're right with the writing of the emails, and I see that all the time. People using a bot to try and synthesize a big text. This is 1994 right now, right? You remember like when we saw email for the first time? Some of your younger folks will remember this, and we knew like this is going to be a big deal. Like I can email the White House and get a response or whatever, and we had no idea what the internet was about to do. This is going to be as disruptive, if not more. And we're right at the edge, and it's exciting and it's terrifying, and it looks like there's good use cases and a lot of people are going to abuse it, and it's going to go through a trough of disillusionment, and there'll be some dark night of the soul before, everything's great. But it is, as long as we bear that in mind, like use it, but use it carefully, be respectful. Don't believe all the hype, and just be responsible.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's sort of already sums up the question that I wanted to ask about AI and communication in particular. Is there a specific thing you would advise communicators to do right now? Because many of them look at this technology and say, hey, this actually parts of my job or feels sort of, they could also be done by AI. There are a couple of like discussions going on, others not, but will leaders and will others really see the difference and so on? So what would be your advice right now, specifically to storytellers, communicators? What should they do?
There's some data that the CIPD in the UK talk about a little bit. I don't know what the EMEA or the global stats are, but CIPD is suggesting that 80% of our workforces are going to need to reskill by 2030. I mean, that's a lot. I suspect that the number is going to be a bit lower than that, but it's still going to be a high number.
And it's very close to 2030, right? So it's not really far away.
Right, exactly. It's not that far away. So it's kind of like, okay, well, what does that mean for me? That sounds pretty scary. I've got to reskill. It's like, and obviously this is very relative as well. It depends on where you are in your career and what you want the rest of your career to look like. But one of the ways I like looking at this, and it's a music analogy. I love music, and whether or not you're classical or whether you might like EDM, it's like you're either a DJ or you're a conductor. I like taking on that analogy of the way that we should be treating AI right now. You've got to embrace it, whether you like it or not. It's coming. It's going to change everybody's jobs. It's going to make a lot of our jobs better. There's a dark side to it as well. But your job is to understand, say, as a conductor, how can I get all of these different models and all of these different assistants, along with all the stuff I know to be true of storytelling and everything about internal comms and all the stuff I've learned from my business and my audience. Your job as a conductor is not necessarily to create some amazing symphony, which is sometimes what people think about storytelling. You've got to be creative. You've got to write the thing. It's like, it's the wrong way of looking at it. These AIs can now help you so much. Think about your role as being a curator. It's like you're a conductor of this orchestra. You're curating the first strings and the, you know what I mean? And the flutes, you got the percussion at the back, and then you got the second violins and all. Your job is to get them telling the right story at the right time, in the right tempo, and coming in and out at the right moment. That's how I'm treating these models. And I'll use different storytelling structures. I'll use different personality assistants. I'll use Llama 3 for something. I might use Mixtral for something else. I might use IBM's Granite for. And I think that's a really healthy way of thinking about your role as a storyteller in comms, especially if you're nervous, which a lot of us are right now. Like we said before, the Edelman Trust Barometer report, 88% of people are scared of losing their jobs. And I think it's somewhere between 50 and 64% of people who say technology is changing too fast in ways that are not good for me. So just start learning. And if I was going to give one piece of advice, it would be just spend 15 minutes a day just learning. And just go and you might even start on YouTube. You go on my LinkedIn if you want. I've got loads of links. There's a great guy at IBM called Armand Ruiz, R-U-I-Z. He's always just posting free courses on AI. Everyone's got them. IBM, Microsoft, they're all over the place. 15 minutes a day. And what some leadership coaches think is that 15 minutes a day for 1 year adds up to 100 hours. And sometimes 100 hours is all it takes to put you in the top 5% of your field. So maybe today, that's your goal for the next year. Just start small. Don't get scared. 15 minutes a day with a cup of tea.
Sounds easy. Yeah.
It's dead easy. And you'll be up there and you won't be overwhelmed. It's going to feel like it's scary at the moment. Fine. You learn fast. Deliberate, dedicated learning. Just be hungry and find an intelligent way to use it, and then teach other people how to use it. It is. I like that.
Fantastic. I think that's already a fantastic closing note, Jeremy. It's been so insightful, and I think we've made a great tour about like the storytelling, the measurement part, the AI part. The one thing I want to repeat here: storytelling is a hard skill. Never forget. Like I love this. One last thing I wanted to ask you: is there anything? I think you have a website where you've written a bit about storytelling.
Yeah, and it's all free. It's just fun. I got no agenda. There's no data capture, no sign up, nothing to sell. Betterstories.org. And all I've done is really there to try and help people tell better stories, especially future leaders and some younger folks. But it's really a collection of all of my favorite assets, all the stuff I've learned around storytelling over the years. I just thought I'll dump it all in one place so that then people have got somewhere to go and have a dig around, and there's videos and tutorials and cheat sheets and stuff on there. So yeah, betterstories.org. You can check it out.
Fantastic. And I would say, if anybody's interested, connect with you on LinkedIn, check out the website. And at this point, I would say we are a bit over an hour, but I think it was very well worth it. So thanks a lot for your time, for all the insights, Jeremy. And to all the listeners, hope to see you again. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.